have made racial profiling work for me. How I have made racial profiling work for me, Tony Lay.
What was the first thing that you thought of when you first saw me? Whether right now or if we spoke earlier in the day. What was the first thought that crossed your mind? Master Toastmaster? Fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests. I submit to you that some of you may have thought something along the lines of, hey, he looks like a smart guy. Maybe some of you thought, bet you he's good at math. And maybe some of you went so far as to think, I know he's got his Star Wars tickets already. It's okay. I'm used to it. And the fact that if any of you had any of these thoughts cross your mind, it's totally understandable, simply because of the fact, well, they're all true. Outside of that, though, I fully understand why you might have come to some of these conclusions, possibly because of my appearance. Now, as children, we're taught a very important lesson. You should never judge a book by its cover. Okay, that makes sense. But if you've ever been to a children's bookstore or a children's section of a library, you'll notice that every cover is incredibly well decorated. In fact, that's how you choose your book when you're a child, is by looking at the cover. So this is a very confusing message. And what I found is that this confusion has extended itself into adulthood. So despite the fact that we, as adults, know very well that we should not judge by appearance, we often do, whether we like it or not. In my case, the most prominent feature of my appearance, other than my great fashion sense, is the simple fact that I'm an Asian male. Now, I know it's really hard to ignore. Now, what this leads to is racial profiling. Not the bad kind that we hear about in the news, but the interpersonal type of racial profiling, where we make decisions or judgments on people simply based on their ethnicity, how they look, how they carry themselves, but specifically we're talking about race. Now, on the interpersonal level, you need to understand that this is also bad. As long as you're not doing it to an extended degree, it's not evil, but it's not a great thing at all. But since I've realized that I can't change the world, I can change myself, but I can't change the world, and because I'm a pragmatist, I've decided to make racial profiling work for me. Now you might ask, Tony, what are you talking about? How do you make racial profiling work for you? That's easy. What we'll do today is we'll talk about some common misconceptions or stereotypes or perceptions, if you will, about Asians, and how I've used them to my advantage by flipping them on their ear. Let's look at the first item. I like to call this one the eternal immigrant, or the mystical Asian. A corollary to this one is all Asians know Kung Fu. Well, what does that mean? Well, because I don't look like, let's say, a European immigrant, I can't blend in as easily in a group of, I don't know, if I were in South Carolina, for example. Probably wouldn't blend in as well. So because of that, I'll constantly be asked questions like, hey, what are you? Where are you from? And my personal favorite, what kind of Asian are you? The cynical kind. So what that means, so my son, even though he was born here, will constantly grow up being asked these questions as well. Well, how do you use this to your advantage? Easy. First off, when I was a kid, I didn't have to worry about bullies. Why? Because anytime anybody tried to bully me, I just dropped one of these on them. And they're out. No issues. How are you gonna bully that kid? Another benefit that I have to it is sometimes I like to mess with the ignorant people. So mainly the people that use what I like to call the universal immigrant voice. It doesn't matter where you're from. If somebody thinks you're an immigrant, they're gonna speak to you the same way. Hi. How are you? Like louder and faster is universal for English, right? So sometimes, depending on the person and depending on my mood, my reaction and my response is simply, oh, I'm so good, thank you so much. I love your country, thank you. My English not good, but I'm sorry. And then I just walk away. Sit there and listen to all the smack that they like to talk about me because now they don't think I speak English, and that's fine. But I don't have to deal with this ignorant person, so I just move on with my life. How else do I use this to my advantage? Well, as you can kind of tell, I like to mess with people. One time I found myself in South Carolina, coincidentally, and like most Asians, I was hungry and I wanted a hamburger. So I see a Burger King and I decide to make my way to the Burger King, like any American should be able to do. But as I walk in the door, I notice something. The conversation stops. Everybody stares to look at the Oriental that just walked through the door. What's he doing here? They don't serve rice? So as everybody stares at me, stunned and shocked, I walk to the counter, And the lady at the front does the immigrant voice. Hi, how can I help you? So what do? Well, this time, I decide to have a little fun. You know what? I would love a Whopper meal, and if you could supersize that bad boy and give me Dr. Pepper, I would love it. Send you on my way. And after that, everybody's okay. They're like, oh, he's one of us. Okay. So the next myth I'd like to talk about is the successful Asian student or the successful Asian employee myth. This one's not a myth, it's true. We work hard, but the thing is, it's not because we're better. It's because we have parents that don't understand the term child abuse. And instead call it a commitment to excellence. As an example of this, I used to get paid $50 for a straight A report card, $100 for a straight A+ report card, and there would be consequences for anything less. Needless to say, this builds in our minds this idea of I must succeed. Well, how do you use this to your advantage? Easy! I have instant credibility. Do you think I wear a bow tie on accident? I'm an Asian man with a bow tie and glasses on. Like, I'm instantly credible. I could tell you anything about science, and unless you actually know the facts, you'd probably believe me. I could ask for two people to start throwing out random numbers, and I could pretend I'm multiplying. In most cases, you're going to believe me. It's instant credibility, and I take advantage of that all the time. Well, how else do I use this to my advantage? Well, at school or at work, it's decreased scrutiny. They're not going to check out the Asian kid with glasses. Hey, is he cheating? Is he messing around? No! I'd get a free pass most of the time. And as always, I like to mess with people. But now that leads us to our third major stereotype and misconception about Asians. Because of the fact that we're always so successful, people think, he's probably got a boring job. He's probably a doctor, or a lawyer, or an accountant, or maybe he's in IT. It's okay. I'm used to this. But how do you use that to your advantage? Well, as we've talked about before, I like to mess with people and I like to have a lot of fun. So what I do is I grab a lab coat and a clipboard and I just start walking around places. Who's gonna stop an Asian guy with a clipboard and a lab coat on? Nobody. I could go to NASA. They'd probably let me through. Dr. Chang, how are you? I'm great. Thank you. Thank you. Great. How else do I use this to my advantage? Well, at a DUI checkpoint, I'm the last guy they stop. I drive a minivan. Like, if you saw me pulling up to a DUI checkpoint and you were a cop, oh, just go on through, sir. Thanks, officer. Have a great night. So going back, we've realized about some of the perceptions of Asians and how I've used them to my advantage. And since we've already established that I can't change the world, I'm going to continue to make racial profiling work for me. Mr. Toastmaster?